Here on all the news, music, and information you get every day, now is the time to let your voice of support for public radio be heard. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org right now to support your public radio. Thank you.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
In Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump has sent hundreds of National Guard troops to Los Angeles to quell what he says is a riot. There's been a weekend of clashes between demonstrators and Los Angeles police and federal agents. The protests were triggered by federal immigration sweeps in the L.A. area on Friday. California Governor Gavin Newsom says he did not agree to allow the National Guard to go in, and he's going to sue the Trump administration. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports that Trump says he told Newsom he was going to do this.
Trump suggested that there were instances of protesters spitting on police officers and throwing things. Trump said he has a statement of, quote, "they spit, we hit," referring to how troops will respond. And he said that he was watching to see what happens in other cities in regards to other protests against police or military members. And Trump seemed to allude to the possibility that he could send in troops to other cities.
NPR's Deepa Shivaram reporting. President Trump's full travel ban on citizens from a dozen nations and a partial travel ban on people from 7 other countries has taken effect. NPR's Luke Garrett has more.
President Trump's ban centers mainly on citizens from African and Middle Eastern countries. The White House says these nations harbor terrorists, fail to cooperate with visa security, and don't ID travelers well enough. They include Afghanistan, Myanmar, Haiti, Iran, Sudan, and Yemen, among 6 other countries. Visa applications from these citizens will now be rejected unless they meet a narrow set of exceptions. But according to the Associated Press, the Trump order does not roll back already issued visas to citizens of these now banned nations. 7 other countries will have restricted entry to the United States. This is the first travel ban Trump has ordered during his second term. During his first, Trump ordered 3 other travel bans against predominantly Muslim nations with varying success in the courts. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
High home prices and mortgage rates are driving a historic shift in the housing market. NPR's Amy Held reports affordability remains a huge issue for would-be home buyers, but it's still becoming more of a buyer's market.
For the first time in more than a decade, sellers outnumber buyers by a third, or 500,000 people, according to a survey by online real estate company Redfin. Just 2 years ago, buyers outnumbered sellers. The shift means negotiating power for buyers could be increasing and home prices decreasing modestly, down 1% by the end of the year, Redfin projects. Expense is driving the change. Median home prices have topped $430,000, and mortgage rates near 7% are more than twice what they were during the pandemic. A separate survey by Bank of America finds faced with high prices, young buyers especially are compromising. About a quarter say they had to buy with a sibling. Amy Held, NPR News.
On Wall Street in pre-market trading, Dow futures are up by about 40 points. This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is now 9:04. The St. Augustine City Commission will consider an update to the city's noise ordinance when it meets this evening. It's the latest step in a years-long effort to make it easier for local police to handle noise complaints. Approval of the new rules would give police officers more ways to determine just how loud businesses are being if nearby residents call to complain. Other items on the city's agenda include a proclamation recognizing June as Pride Month and a resolution opposing the federal government's plans to ramp up offshore drilling for oil and natural gas. The meeting starts at 5 in the City Commission chambers at the Leitner Museum on King Street downtown. The meeting will also be broadcast live on the city's website. The TaxSlayer Gator Bowl is getting a primetime slot this year. The game will be played at 7:30 p.m. on December 27th and televised nationally on ABC. The joint announcement by ESPN and Gator Bowl officials also confirms that the game will be played at Everbank Stadium, currently in the initial stages of a $1 billion renovation. The game will feature schools from the Southeastern Conference and the Atlantic Coast Conference. Bowl officials say those teams will be announced on December 7th. It's going to be a warm day today here in Northeast Florida. Highs will reach the low to mid 90s. Drier air moving into the area will keep storm activity more widely scattered throughout the day. Overnight, lows will drop down into the low to mid 70s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR produce programming that meets the highest standards of public service in journalism and cultural expression.
Blackwater Swamp in North America and the lifeblood of the St. Mary's and Suwanee rivers. We talked to the head of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge about why it should also be designated a World Heritage Site. Later, St. Augustine's mayor is honored for standing up for home rule. And we tell you how to get a sneak peek inside the old casket factory as it comes back to life as the Jack's History Center. But first, the 400,000-acre Okefenokee Swamp has been nominated for listing on the United Nations World Heritage List. Here to explain why is Kim Bednarek, Executive Director of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. Kim, did I get your name there? Is it Bednarek?
Yeah, so it's Kim Bednarek.
Bednarek. Okay.
I'm the Executive Director of Okefenokee Swamp Park. We are the 501c3 partner to the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge.
All
and
right.
The refuge manager is my amazing partner, Michael Lusk.
Okay. Thank you for coming down today. I appreciate it. I know it's a bit of a drive.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about the history of the refuge. This is the largest national wildlife refuge east of the Mississippi.
It is.
That's a pretty significant designation, though. Not everybody knows what a refuge is. Can you just sort of explain what that means and what significance it carries?
Yeah, so there's nearly 570 national wildlife refuges in the United States. National wildlife refuges are managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That makes them different from national parks. National parks are on the other side. The Department of Interior manages national parks on one side, and then National Wildlife Refuges under Fish and Wildlife Service on sort of the other side. So they are designed to care for wildlife, right? They're set up to ensure that they have a place to thrive, and they focus on biological diversity and management, whereas national parks are really designed for people to enjoy and experience wildlife.
And for people who haven't been to the Okefenokee or perhaps have passed by and not sort of realized, it's kind of the U on the border between Florida and Georgia in this northeast part of the state. When you're kind of looking at a map, it is the swamp that basically makes that U coming down into, sort of the area that's bordered on either side by Florida.
Yeah, it's the swamp. It's also the St. Mary's River.
The St.
You were
Mary's River.
saying that
Yeah.
Okefenokee is the headwaters of the St. Mary's and the Suwanee River, and that's the St. Mary's, which is our border river between Florida and Georgia.
But it is an enormous parcel of land. I mean, that part that is kind of, juts into the state of Florida, and then this 400,000-acre enormous tract of property.
Yes. It's the largest blackwater swamp in North America. And it was
for Blackwater, not everybody knows what that is either.
Yeah, so it's really so peat is on the bottom of the swamp. It was formed about 6,500 years ago when the Atlantic Ocean receded, and that peat is like tea, right? So it's like all of the plant matter that falls into the bottom of the swamp decays, and it's like a tannic acid, and so it looks like if you hold it up in a cup, it looks kind of brownish, and then when you look at it when you're looking down from a boat, it looks very dark like black water because the very bottom is peat, accumulated a density of peat.
But it is a freshwater.
It's fresh water, yes. It is filled from precipitation.
Okay.
And it is 438,000 acres. So you could fit all of New York City and their boroughs inside the Okefenokee Swamp. And then 407,000 of those acres are managed by the National Wildlife Refuge System. And then 350,000 of those acres are designated National Wilderness Area. And that's where you can apply for permits to go in and camp inside the swamp and have a true wilderness experience on a platform.
So explain to us what I mean, this has been a wildlife refuge since the 30s, is that right?
1937.
Does that come with some certain protections?
It does. It's a federal property, and it's managed by the National Wildlife Refuge System. So Michael Lusk, who's the refuge manager, has staff that manage the trails, keep the trails open, that ensure that manages the wildlife, manages the longleaf pine ecosystem that is included in the National Wildlife Refuge. They manage for species, some threatened and endangered, like gopher tortoises and red-cockaded woodpeckers, indigo snakes. So it's really that's the job of the refuge.
So we're talking about a bid to become like an internationally recognized treasure, essentially, this UNESCO site of World Heritage list of World Heritage sites. Can you talk about how this area, was initially selected for this process, to begin this process, and why?
Yeah, so it's really kind of a wonderful story. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge was put on the list in 1982. So it's been on the list for nearly 40 years. And go back to what we were talking about, that national parks and refuges are very different. There's 26 World Heritage sites in the United States, and the 12 that are natural sites are all managed by the National Park Service, including the Everglades here in Florida. So for the Okefenokee to be on the list, Fish and Wildlife Service has never actually gone through this process before. So it's been on that list for 40 years. About 3 years ago, been a few threats in the Okefenokee region. If you've heard about the mining situation, it's really created a spotlight on the Okefenokee, and it created an opportunity for us, Okefenokee Swamp Park, to step up as the fiscal agent and project manager for the refuge to really forward the nomination. What happened the last 3 years has been incredible. We've raised about $600,000, and we've finished the dossier for the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge to demonstrate its outstanding universal value for its biodiversity and its biological processes as one of the most ecologically intact wetlands in the world. And that nomination was completed in January of 2025, and we're looking for an inscription process to be completed hopefully in 2026. It's the only national wildlife refuge that's ever gone through this process, and it will be the first World Heritage Site in the state of Georgia and the only wetland of its kind to have actually gone through this process as well.
And it would be only the second in Florida, is that right, after the
Second in
Everglades?
Florida, yeah, and I think that's so important, and to note that the Okefenokee belongs to Florida as much as it belongs to Georgia, and the nomination is a Florida-Georgia nomination. I just came from the Corridor Connect conference for the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation, and that's what we were really talking about. Wildlife doesn't know borders. These ecosystems are connected, and the Okefenokee is connected to Florida and Georgia, and it's an incredible wetland.
If you can, you could hold up that dossier that you brought with you.
Which way am I?
You can just hold it up in front of you. I
Okay.
think that we can get a shot of it on our camera. So if you're watching the live stream, you can see this. But it really is a thick and very impressive document. I mean, there's some beautiful pictures, and of course, the Okefenokee is a beautiful place. But it is also just chock full of data. And I imagine it must have been an enormous task to sort of compile all of the information that is in this, essentially this application for World Heritage status. So can you talk about what that process was? What kind of information are you trying to pull together to make the case that this be listed by UNESCO?
Yeah, so in order to be, the nomination dossier is critically important because when you are spelling out what is the OUV, the outstanding universal value, you have to meet certain criteria. Our team chose the biodiversity as well as the biological processes. We talked about how ecologically intact it is, which is so rare. Think about the eastern seaboard to have a place like this that is remote, has no invasive species, is absolutely ecologically intact. It's a class 1 airshed and watershed. And so we were documenting all of that in this dossier. We had an incredible team that was led by experts. Reed Noss is an expert here out of Florida that wrote the section on biodiversity. And then Hans Josten is an expert out of Germany that wrote the section on peatlands.
Okay, and peatlands, I mean, that is actually part of the name or the inspiration for the name Okefenokee, is that right?
Land of the Trembling Earth. It is known as Land of the Trembling Earth. And if you come visit us or have been out to visit us, you'll see the peat batteries that are basically these blow ups, the peat that we talked about on the bottom of the swamp, right? So it blows up to the top and gases build up, it blows up to the top, and then all the plant life starts to grow. And if you walk on it, it's basically like trembling earth, like you're walking on water.
One of the things that this swamp does, in addition to serve as a home for a number of species, as you said, things like the wood stork, I guess I read in your dossier maybe an estimated 15,000 alligators, which
Yeah.
is a
They're
pretty.
very friendly
Yeah,
alligators.
okay. Good to know. Good to know. They're not in Florida, but I guess in Georgia there's different rules. But this peat and the swamp that kind of, you know, it covers over the water that covers over that peat contains a lot of carbon.
Carbon.
It kind of
Yeah.
traps carbon, and that's a pretty important function as well in terms of if the swamp weren't there. I mean, tell us what would
So it's
happen.
it's one of the largest undisturbed peat deposits on the North American coastal plain. So it's sequestering millions of tons of carbon. So it's essentially it's a giant carbon bank,
Hmm.
right? So the story of the Okefenokee is a story of fire and water. It's a pyrogenic ecosystem, and so on the bottom of the swamp is the peat, and then you have these corridors, right, of channels of water that go through the swamp, and then you have these islands in the swamp, and we have some of the largest wildfires in Georgia and Florida in the Okefenokee because we have lightning strikes
Yeah.
and the fires burn through the swamp. And so we want to have our water and our peat working together so that when the fires come through, it keeps it open to be a swamp, but it's not so dry that all that peat catches fire.
There was an enormous fire there several years ago, and I assume it's out, but it was taking
There it is.
many,
Yes.
many, many months, if not more than a year, to put out. And
Yes.
so it is difficult, I guess, once they get going.
So, management of the National Wildlife Refuge allows for fires to burn. So, fire is an integral part of that healthy ecosystem. What we want to ensure is that the fire stays within the swamp boundaries, right? So, there's some incredible landowners that partner around the Okefenokee region to work on wildfire protection and wildfire fighting.
So this process, is pulling together evidence, I guess, that this is an unusual place in not just for us here in Florida and Georgia, but for the world
Mhm.
to appreciate. Um, And, there are other sites that are recognizable on it. We mentioned the Everglades, the Great Smoky Mountains, Yellowstone, from the United States, but there are places competing around the world for the same kind of designation. So,
Mhm.
how do you make the case that this merits that ranking, that really unique status, that it is a treasure that should be recognized globally?
Yeah, so that is what's so important about this nomination dossier. There's a number of things that go into a nomination packet, but you're really showing that the Okefenokee is not just special for the United States, but it's special on the global scale. Its ecological integrity and it's a biodiversity hotspot is outstanding on the global scale. So for those of us who live in the Southeast and have immense pride in the Okefenokee Swamp and National Wildlife Refuge, what's so exciting about this opportunity is it's actually showcasing to the entire world that this is a place of incredible beauty, diversity, and value to the entire globe.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Kim Bednarek about the bid by the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge to become listed on the UNESCO site of international
World Heritage Site.
World Heritage Sites.
Yeah.
And if you have questions or comments, if you've ever been to the Okefenokee, you're welcome to give us a call. We're at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So I want to ask you, I know that this has been, this was something that was kind of formally, I guess, introduced or proposed under in the very kind of tail end of the Biden administration.
Mhm.
But it has gotten bipartisan support, including a letter from the former governor of Georgia, Sonny Perdue, who wrote a letter in April asking President Trump to support this effort. And I just kind of want to ask you about, um, how how the feeling is about. I mean, this is an administration that has not necessarily been uh, well received from the environmental world, just because of a lot of rollbacks in terms of pollution protections, clean air, clean water standards, um, incursions that are being made in, oceans and Arctic and some national park systems. Um, is there any feeling or sense as to, whether that shift is going to impact the chances of this bid to be successful?
So we've been incredibly pleased with the support we're receiving from the Department of Interior. Um, Secretary Burgum has been supportive, and this is a bipartisan effort. And I think it's really an opportunity for us to come together around something as special as the Okefenokee and say it's good for the rural communities around the Okefenokee as an economic opportunity for prosperity. It's also good to recognize our public lands in the U.S. as having value on the global scale. Um, this is not a partisan issue. And we've had the support of both of our senators, John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock. We've had our support of our Congressman, Buddy Carter. He's a District 1 congressman. He's been a phenomenal supporter. Chancellor Perdue has stepped up because he knows this is simply good for Georgia.
Because he's now over the state university system. Yeah.
Yes, he
Okay.
is, as well as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. And honestly, countless others have stepped up on both sides to say the Okefenokee is absolutely worthy of World Heritage nomination. This is going to be an incredible opportunity for Georgia, and it connects to the work that we do here in Florida as well.
And one of the arguments you sort of alluded to, but is the economic impact that could follow if this is successful, this effort. There has been some estimate that annual visitors could double to the Okefenokee if the World Heritage label is granted, and some estimates that it could create 750 long-term jobs and add 60 million to local economies, to the nearby counties. So is that how is that calculated? How is that impact determined, and kind of what would be the time frame to realize some of those economic benefits if they're to happen?
So the Conservation Fund, which is a national conservation organization, conducted an economic impact analysis of the opportunity for the designation for the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge and its direct and indirect impacts to the economy. So we know there's a 60 to 90 million dollars of benefit to the Okefenokee currently for visitation that occurs through ecotourism, agritourism, hospitality. So we looked at other sites in the U.S. like the Alamo. The Alamo is a World Heritage Site, and it's under the national park. And we looked at what happened at other sites in the U.S. once they were inscribed as World Heritage Sites. And we applied those metrics back to the Okefenokee, and we do expect a significant increase in visitation. The Conservation Fund, their analysis put it at a 100% increase. So the jobs that you currently have, which is 750, those will double. Your visitors, 500 to 800,000 annually, that will double. And then the economic impact will double, which will be amazing for the tax base. It's a healthcare desert in some of the communities around the Okefenokee. There are not the kind of education opportunities we'd like to see for the kiddos that are there, or workforce development. This really is a driver to ensure that those things exist in communities in Georgia that haven't had those opportunities historically. And if we can have a hospital in Charlton County, which is right over the line, right, you cross over from Nassau County, that would be amazing for the people who live there. So it's an opportunity in so many ways.
So you mentioned, mining as one of the kind of motivating factors to get together more kind of in a more organized fashion on this bid for World Heritage designation. And that threat remains. We have done some reporting on this program about the mining effort and why that would, potentially impinge on the border, the eastern border of the swamp. And, the fear is that it could compromise parts of the swamp, or, create some drainage away from the swamp and possibly imperil the wildlife that lives there. Can you let us know, how this would impact that mining desire, if at all, and maybe give us an update on where that mining proposal stands right now?
Yeah. So the work that we do for World Heritage has run parallel to the permitting process for strip mining to occur on Trail Ridge for titanium dioxide. And so the spotlight on the threat has been the spotlight on the opportunity for the nomination. Um, the concerns that a lot of the community members have and the environmental community has around mining would be that Trail Ridge, which is the hydrologic dam that keeps the Okefenokee,
Keeps the water in, sort of on the eastern side.
keeps the water right. If you put a hole in that, which is what would occur in this mining process that's being proposed, then you create an opportunity for seepage that could change the water levels in the swamp. There's lots of other uh, concerns having to do with the mine and where it's particularly going to be located, which would be in between the Okefenokee Swamp and the St. Mary's River. But essentially, we talked about earlier in the show what the dance of fire and water, and that there will always be wildfires in the Okefenokee. So if your water level is dropped by even a little bit, right, through this mining process, and then you have these fires that are guaranteed to come through, then you're not going to have the appropriate balance of water in the swamp. And then those fires could be absolutely uncontrollable. And think of all that peat that's on the bottom of the swamp that could get dried out if it's not wet the way it's supposed to be. So, the mining process has brought a lot of concerns because we have an ecologically intact, profoundly beautiful swamp that has this great opportunity to become a World Heritage Site. And it seems like the risk of mining really doesn't offer the same opportunity. And it really could threaten the integrity of the Okefenokee. And they punch a hole through the hawthorn layer that goes underneath the Okefenokee Swamp into the Floridan aquifer, which is the water that comes to Florida as much as it provides water to Georgia. So there's lots of risks.
Well, we talked as well about carbon sequestration and kind of how the peat holds that carbon. So if the water levels went down or were released by mining, presumably some of that could also be exposed to the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that ordinary people should be doing if they're interested in this effort, or is this really just kind of between the officials that are doing the application and the officials that are determining whether or not it will get that listing?
So we absolutely needed the political will for the nomination to move forward, and we have it, and it has moved forward. But what would be amazing is to have more visitors in the Okefenokee. So I say, come to the Okefenokee Swamp, learn about it. There's 3 gateway communities in the Okefenokee. There's 3 counties, Charlton County, Ware County, and Clinch County, that all offer incredible opportunities to either paddle or camp or meet our ambassador animals. Come visit, learn about it, and then follow our journey. We're expecting a decision in 2026. And, Northeast Florida is going to see as many visitors as Southeast Georgia. If you're going to visit the Okefenokee Swamp, you're flying into Jacksonville International Airport, and it's only a 40-minute ride from JIA to the headquarters for the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge to begin your journey into just an unbelievably beautiful national wildlife refuge.
We have a message from Tom on Facebook. He says, my scout troop annually camped and canoed the Okefenokee Swamp. He says the alligators were friendly. So some vote of confidence there from Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Do you find that there's a lot of people in Florida or Georgia that are just kind of unaware of this enormous refuge and perhaps just are ignorant to what's there or haven't visited?
Yeah, it's rural. It's very remote. So I was in Jacksonville for 20 years. I worked at the Discovery School. And so when I made the transition in 2020 to the Okefenokee, I knew about it because I enjoy the outdoors. But I realized when I was telling my friends what I was doing and where I was going, why I was so excited about the work, they were like, where's the Okefenokee? So I think this is a great time for Jacksonville to learn about what's on their doorstep, this incredible ecosystem, this incredible wilderness destination that's about to join, hopefully, the World Heritage List, which is phenomenal. And it's right here. And I just don't think our community in Northeast Florida knows enough about it yet.
And so there are opportunities for people who haven't been there. I mean, you can hike there, you can rent canoes and kayaks, and you can explore the waterway, but there's also guided tours at least one of the entrances, one of the three. There
Yeah.
are some cabins for people who don't necessarily want to do outdoor camping. Um, but tell me about its designation as at least part of it as a dark sky place, because there those for people who aren't aware. I mean, those are places where you are able to see the night sky really as kind of as it's meant to be seen,
Yeah.
right? Where there isn't a lot of light pollution, and you're able to see stars in great quantities.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stephen C. Foster State Park, which is a state park that's inside the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge on the west side of the swamp, which is Fargo, Clinch County. It's the only state park in the U.S. that's inside a National Wildlife Refuge that is designated as a dark sky park. So when you're on the west side of the Okefenokee Swamp, which remember is this huge landscape, and you're out there at night and you're camping either in the park, like you said, you don't have to go out on a platform, and you go out even into the parking lot and you look up at the night sky, you can see the Milky Way with your naked eye. It is extraordinary, and we're losing our dark skies because of light pollution. And the fireflies, incredible. So, having dark skies at night is critical for our health, the health of our ecosystem, and it makes for a phenomenal educational experience.
I want to take a call from Sally in Springfield. Good morning, Sally. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I love the Okefenokee Swamp. I visited it, and it was one of the most memorable moments of my life. We took a canoe out at dusk, which was the idea of my more adventurous partner. But I'm glad that we did because, oh my gosh, it looked like I was in another world. The trees, the swamp, and yes, the alligators. It was just incredible. I would encourage anybody to visit.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, I mean, an extraordinary place, and one hopefully that will earn that recognition. So, I know you said that 2026 is kind of the focus here. What is the timetable?
Right. So the nomination was submitted in January of 25. And then we have a team that will visit us to learn about the Okefenokee to make sure that what's in our nomination dossier is what they find in the Okefenokee Swamp. And then the World Heritage Convention gathers every July, and they make decisions on World Heritage Site applications. And so if everything works for us in the next 6 months, we would expect to have the Okefenokee as being determined at the July World Heritage Convention.
In this year?
2026.
In 2026.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Do you know when the visitors are coming?
Hopefully this fall.
Okay.
We want them to come in like October. It's a really nice month in the Okefenokee.
Yeah, a little bit less swampy in the
Yeah.
swamp. Well, Kim Bednarek, she is the executive director of Okefenokee Swamp Park. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
What a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute with the designated hometown hero of the oldest city. Welcome back. For the 8th year in a row, St. Augustine Mayor Nancy Sykes Klein has been recognized for her hometown advocacy. She was recently named a 2025 Home Rule Hero by the Florida League of Cities. Mayor, thanks for coming here. Congratulations.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Of course, I'm very happy to be here this morning with you.
Well, we're delighted to have you. I wonder if you can sort of explain the challenge of home rule for people who don't understand what it is, what it's supposed to be.
Okay. So basically, the Florida legislature, in its wisdom, every year when they meet during session, they make laws, they make new laws, they improve old laws. And a lot of times they're not totally mindful of what the impact some of those laws have on our unique communities. We like to say, one size does not fit all. Florida is a very diverse state from the south to the north to the panhandle to the central. We have different issues, but when you make laws that are supposed to fit everybody into that box, it doesn't really work very well for us. So so what we do as a group is we advocate at to the legislators individually, normally on bills that we're monitoring that we see pop up.
You say
We
we
focus
are
when
you
we
talking about
say,
the Florida League of
yeah, the
Cities?
Florida League of Cities is who does provide the award, the Home Rule Hero Award, and they have a criteria. But mostly we're a group of electeds, local electeds. A lot of us are mayors, and we do primarily the work of advocating for our communities, for all of our smaller communities. There's over 300 smaller cities that are represented in the Florida League of Cities. So home rule is important to us. That means that we have the leeway that we need to create our own laws to protect our citizens and our homes.
I mean, you say, home rule is important to you, but it's also important to voters. I mean, the concept of home rule was actually put into the Florida Constitution by voters
Yes.
saying very much the same thing. We believe that our communities are unique places. We believe that the people we elect on a local basis can and should be advocating for our own local interests, and that a lot of those decisions shouldn't necessarily be made at a statewide
State.
level.
And that's largely ignored. So, but yes, that's correct.
So when that was placed in the Constitution, and I think it's been, more than 50 years, how has the trend been when it comes to lawmakers in Tallahassee respecting or regarding home rule?
Well, I want to say this first. There are those that came from local governments. They kind of came up through the ranks as city elected at the local level, or they came up through the counties and they get into the Florida legislature and they understand the community's issues. So I don't want to put everybody into one box, but most of the electeds at the state level are coming from industry or they're coming in as attorneys. They've never served at the local level, so they don't really understand how communities work. Our job is to educate them and let them know that. So I think that I think your question was
Well, when if there has been a greater movement away from the embrace of home rule, like if there is a trend that's discernible, or is this just in the 50 years since it was put in
absolutely.
the Constitution? Just
So correct. And so over time, so in my 8 years, I've been active in Tallahassee much longer than 8 years, going way back before I was ever elected, but not as a home rule hero, but as just, going up to Tallahassee representing the interests of the city uh, on special topics like the lighthouse
yeah,
or the Bridge of Lions,
right.
or like those issues. They over time, I've seen less and less regard. Generally, the trend is, and I don't know if that's conscious or not. I can't necessarily point fingers, but what is interesting is with that correspondent rise and sort of a numbness to local, kind of a numbness, I would say, to local issues. We at the Florida League of Cities have become much more active and more people involved in what I'm doing,
Yeah.
which is advocating for home rule. And I will tell you, the Florida League of Cities has become very effective. They have a team of of advocates and lobbyists in Tallahassee 24/7 during session that we can call on and work with. And they monitor, they keep us up to date. They've really become a powerhouse. And we begin meeting. I think our first meeting is in September. I'm on a policy committee, a legislative policy committee That's this particular one has to do with intergovernmental relations, mobility, and emergency management. And we began meeting in September. We meet 3 times. We develop our policies, and their job in Tallahassee, the staff of the Florida League of Cities, is to assist us and to let us know what's going on, on the ground, because we can't all be there. So, but yes, there has been a big trend, and I think it's because a lot of it is that I always say they do it because they can. The legislators have a political power. They have one party really ingrained and ruling, and they have been for a long time. So they do things because they can.
There are so many issues that this has impacted, and some people have heard about them, whether it's reducing the use of plastic bags in communities or straws, even sunscreen bans, balloons. Some marine communities have worked to try to ban the use of those. But there have also been heat exposure regulations, which the state has said, local governments can't set limits on how people are working or when they're, required to have water breaks, um, public school funding, minimum wage regulations, housing needs. A big one for St. Augustine is short-term rentals. Can you talk a little bit about kind of why St. Augustine has a unique need when it comes to things like Airbnbs or VRBOs, and um, how that has been stymied in some ways by what the legislature has required?
Well, yes. We're very fortunate in St. Augustine because we did, back a number of years ago, have an issue come up, and I think it was about a wedding venue. It was a home in a neighborhood. It was down on Water Street, and there was a gentleman who was renting it out for big weddings, and so it was a problem with the neighborhood. But in response to the outcry, we crafted some protections on large parties and things like that. And that law we use now to protect certain areas from longer term rentals or shorter term rentals in our residential neighborhoods. I'll just leave it at that. So we had the insight years ago. We didn't know that this phenomenon was coming of short-term rentals, and that we were going to have this web application that would be able to allow people to rent units all over the world for a night or two. So we were very fortunate, but yes, our problem in the city is not necessarily unique. It's not a problem that all cities in the state have. It's usually cities that are near maybe Disney, where you get a lot of vacationers. So, St. Augustine is a big tourist town. So it is a big problem. I think that I was told this morning that it was about 900 units now in the city are short-term rental units.
And so one instance
That's a lot.
that the city might want to address in regulating short-term rentals might be parking, for instance. So if you have a house that's kind of a party house in a block, and you've got people coming with 5, 6 cars to
It's solid waste is one of them. Noise, of course. Too many people in the units. We've tried to regulate that in a different section of our code. Number of vehicles. There's registration for safety. That's a big, big, big one. Like hotels are always saying that's not fair how you let short-term rentals operate without the same standards that you apply to us.
Right.
And we're in charge. We spend lots of money keeping our visitors safe. I mean, our customers safe, and with exit signs and things like that. So the state has allowed us to do some things, but they're very, very tight. And it seems like almost every single year someone's got a bill that's trying to strip us of what we've got grandfathered in.
Yeah.
And then add some new onerous thing that happens to be a problem in their own community.
Well, you say that, lawmakers do it because they can, but I mean, I guess I would push back a little bit on that. I would suggest that, somebody's benefiting from the laws as they're realized, if it's not the local community. So who
Yes.
is benefiting when local communities are being told you can't regulate the use of plastic bags, you can't regulate sunscreens, you can't,
So I will tell you this. What I know is when I go to the hearings, We didn't have a short-term rental bill last year to fight. Um, so it wasn't last year; it was the year before, and the year before, and the year before. It's Expedia, for an example, Booking.com. They're the ones that come with their lobbying team and say, pass this law. We need this law. We support this law. It's individual cities that say no. So I would venture to guess it would be the big platforms like VRBO and Airbnb, Expedia, Booking, and now there's a bunch of them. There's a whole lot of them. So,
I mean, is that applied to
Expedia is always there. I will tell you that.
one issue that has come up particularly concerning, I think, for some local governments? I know we've talked about it on this program as it relates to the city of Jacksonville. Is the question of what happens to taxes? Especially property taxes, which has it's been a subject where lawmakers are talking about eliminating them, which would be a huge hit for local governments.
Well, in taxes pertaining to short-term rentals or just
No,
property?
like property in general.
I think
Or
most of the people that I talk to are very aware that if you don't collect, that local governments run on those ad valorem taxes largely. Now, in the city of St. Augustine, we've diversified a little bit. We're not as dependent on ad valorem as a lot of communities are. For example, St. Johns County is fairly dependent on ad valorem taxes. But we have fees. We've done other things for different reasons. But yeah, that. I think most people at the local level say, well, then where is the money going to come from to fund local government? We need local government to do the enforcement of things like pick up trash, enforce the noises ordinances, come and enforce the parking and all those other things that need to be done, the services that we deliver that are critical and our basic services.
Public safety, schools.
Every kind of thing, yeah. At local level, we don't really do the schools. That's kind of a county function. That's a county
Yeah,
function.
I think that's more of an impact here in Jacksonville.
But yeah, they would be impacted, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, to me, it's like most people really don't think, it's almost like, why are you even saying that?
Yeah.
Because the money's got to come from somewhere. You better show us where it's going to come from. And if tourists aren't going to be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
Can't put it on the tourists.
Just briefly, St. Augustine does have special challenges that I think a lot of communities don't have. And some of the resilience issues are big, but historic preservation is also a big one. And you had some success this year lobbying.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. We, for the second year in a row, we had our unlawful demolition bill, we called it. We were very fortunate. We have really good relationships with our local delegation. Senator Tom Leake sponsored our bill. Representative Sam Greco. They're both new to us. So we have an all-new delegation. He sponsored it, and I think Representative Kim Kendall, Representatives Judson Sapp. So really everybody really helped us push that bill through. But essentially what that will do is it will raise the stakes on someone demolishing a historic structure without a permit, without a demolition permit.
Well, Mayor,
before it was $5,000. Now
Yeah.
it can be much, much more. So we're really happy about that. We think it'll be a great deterrent to
Mayor,
unlawful demolition.
we'll have to leave it there. But
Okay.
congrats again on being a 2025 Home Rule Hero.
Thank
I appreciate it. Thanks for
you.
talking to us today.
I appreciate you
All right.
very much.
Thank you. And we'll
Okay.
be back in just a minute with a look at how the History Center is remaking the historic casket factory.
Volunteers in Medicine Jacksonville is dedicated to helping the working uninsured stay on top of their health. High blood pressure is a silent killer. A healthy reading is under 120/80. Learn more at vimjax.org. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Highway, hospital, home, work. Where injuries happen can make a difference in the law and the outcome.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
On the next Fresh Air, comedian Atsuko Okatsuka is known for finding humor in the dysfunction of her immigrant family and the daily responsibilities of being an adult. Her new stand-up special is about her father, who reappeared in her life after decades away. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
We tend to associate brainwashing with cults and hostages, but scientific historian Rebecca Lamov says it can happen to anyone.
It's not pure coercion. There's an element of participation. There's a kind of a yes, even if it's unknown to yourself or not.
The instability of truth, the history and science of brainwashing, and what it teaches us as misinformation spreads online. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
After slashing the federal workforce by tens of thousands earlier this year, the Trump administration is looking to fill those empty positions again, this time with Trump loyalists. The move challenges more than 150 years of precedent set by the Pendleton Act of 1870 that created a nonpartisan civil service. How the future of the federal workforce could change again under Trump. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the Jacksonville History Center hosts its third annual history fair this weekend, and it's the first public event at the newly renovated Florida Casket Company, which is also the center's new home. Here to tell us about it is Dr. Alan Bliss. He's the CEO of the Jacksonville History Center, also known as the Jacksonville Historical Society, I think, in some circles. Welcome. Nice to see you, Alan.
Good morning, Ann. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here. And yes, you and your listeners are accustomed to hearing me introduce myself as the CEO of the Jacksonville Historical Society. The organization still exists under that name, but we have, over this past few years, we've been rebranding ourselves as the Jacksonville History Center for two reasons. Number one, the word society seems exclusive, like there's a wall around what we do. The only boundary around what we do is Jacksonville, which is plenty. The other reason for the change is that we are, for the first time in our 96 years of existence, pivoting to an organization that has a venue, a physical place where we actually can represent, exhibit, and share Jacksonville's stories. That's the Jacksonville History Center, and that's the result of our project that you just mentioned, the renovation of what used to be the old Florida Casket Company building.
So those of us who know the Historical Society as it was, we always think of the buildings along A. Philip Randolph, but that's only part of the campus that you now have, which is two different locations and four buildings, including this new, well, not new. I mean, the Casket Company is not new. It is a historic building, but it is newly acquired.
It's a historic building, but it's like new. It's a 105-year-old building whose effective date of construction is 2025. It is a complete renovation. But yeah, you're right. We have two historic campuses, one on either side of the arena. The church and the Merrill House on the east side, that's where most people are accustomed to visiting us for our speaker series programs, the Gingerbread Extravaganza.
Right.
The building where we are hosting this weekend's history fair is on the west side of the arena. It's at 314 Palmetto Street.
Okay.
It fronts on the street across from the arena. We're immediately north of the Maxwell House coffee plant, and we have two buildings on that campus. The Florida Casket Company building is a three-story factory on which we have just completed a $3.5 million renovation. So this event, the History Fair, is how we begin to fill those spaces with Jacksonville's stories.
Yeah, and so this casket company, I mean, first of all, we should sort of explain that there were caskets actually manufactured there.
Yeah.
It is adjacent to the old St. Luke's Hospital, which is also one of these buildings on site that you own. I've heard it said that there's not necessarily a direct connection between the two.
I see where you're going with that, and we've heard that one before. So the old St. Luke's Hospital is where my offices are. It's where the archives operate out of. It is an 1878 building, the first building built in Florida to be a hospital, and it's the oldest building to survive the Great Fire. Right next to that, the Florida Casket Company was built in 1920. That was several years after the hospital had moved out, so no relationship, no operating relationship, so to speak, between those two.
Operating, I see what you did there with the operating relationship.
Thank
That's
you.
nice. Yeah. And so this event this coming weekend is really going to be the first opportunity most people have had a chance to kind of peek inside this renovated casket factory building. What all is going to be there eventually?
The spaces that we are going to be filling out and occupying will be exhibits and galleries related to Jacksonville's history on the first floor, a event and activity space on the second floor, also with exhibits, and the third floor devoted to collections, and that will be the Haskell Archive of Jacksonville History.
And so some of the history that is going to be showcased is Jacksonville's musical history. Some of it's going to be civil rights history, but it really is going to kind of run the gamut on that first floor.
Yeah, so over the summer, we're working with a design consultant, a Chicago-based firm that's going to be helping us design, conceive, and fill out the ideas for permanent galleries, exhibits devoted to significant stories from Jacksonville's history, like the Great Fire. And then we will have traveling exhibits that focus on other aspects of the city's history. So that's enough to certainly occupy the first floor and expand into the second. We will have periodic rotating exhibits, as you mentioned, civil rights, music history, other aspects of the city's past, its significant people, the seaport, the river. This is a city that is rotten with cool, interesting, complicated stories. More than any other city in Florida, Jacksonville is historically significant and fascinating, and we have done less with that than any of our peer cities in Florida.
Well,
Fixing that is our job.
That's right, and that's changing. So the third annual Jacksonville History Fair, it is Saturday, June 14th. It's from 10 to 3 at the Jacksonville History Center at 314 Palmetto Street. Alan Bliss, thank you so much for coming on today. I hope it's a great success.
Thanks to you, Ann. Always a pleasure.
All right, pleasure having you. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have questions or comments, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. If you missed anything today, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive at WJCT.org or your favorite podcast platform. Our executive producer is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. And our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we preview an exhibit turning the stories of escaped enslaved people into uniquely moving portraits. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.
Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.